All the way from bloody South Devon.
Hello and welcome to Camera Central Podcast. Today I have
David Clapp.
David Clapp talking about some photography, hopefully. Might talk a bit about some guitar as well, because
Yeah, I've actually over the last couple of days I've written a really trippy song on my on one of my lovely guitars I own,
yeah.
and I've also written some hip hop.
Okay, you also written some hip hop. So are you just like a creative in every way, shape and form then? Because you do such a lot of like things, and your photography kind of like leans towards that as well, because when I first met you, of course, the link will be here for the video. It was for the Canon training, right? And like the photos that you were showing off were like there wasn't a genre. There wasn't there was genres within what you do, but like you literally don't narrow yourself into a field. It's like everything, right?
It always has been. I think that's one of the things that started right at the beginning because of the fact that I was trying to sustain a living out of it. And the thing was is that I was very lucky in where I started all this because of the geography, the area where I was seascapes, was landscapes, and I got bored of it. And then I wanted to shoot architecture,
Yeah,
and then I realised that these sort of things come to me, they completely envelop me, and then they pass,
yeah,
and then I pull something else towards me. So it was that I suppose was the reason is that I tend to get really obsessed about things, or a specific subject or a specific idea, and I'll hold on to that for maybe like 2 weeks, and then it will go, and then I'll be like rebooting and thinking about where to go next, I guess.
yeah,
But so I guess it's been a combination of that, but it's also, I guess it's because I really love equipment, I really love lenses, I really love camera bodies.
yeah.
I've got cameras from starting from. I've got the oldest one I've got is 1930,
Oh God, really?
and the newest one I've got actually. Okay, well we could say the newest one I've got is my R3, which I bought earlier
Yeah.
this year. But I've actually got another camera since then, which was a 1981 Mamiya 645,000S, which I bought last weekend. And the reason why I bought it was because I lost it, as in I fell out with a mate of mine, and he's now got it.
Yeah.
And I was in a store up in North Wales at the weekend. We won't mention them, of course. And I was rifling through the boxes, and I suddenly found this boxed 1000S, and I went, "What on earth is this?" And they said, "Oh, it's had one owner. She's never even used it." And I opened it up, mint. I mean,
Really?
absolutely mint condition camera.
I remember when I found a mint condition Canon A1.
Oh yeah,
I don't know if have you experienced Canon A1s?
I have.
So they famously have this cough that's like really kind of like almost sad. It's like whenever you take a shot, and this one was box mint, and it didn't have this cough, and it's like rare to find one of those. And
Wow.
but it's nice to find that, isn't it? Just
Yeah.
like the mint, like old film cameras, nothing nicer than
Well, it's a bit like you know the first thing you do after looking at it is you want to smell it.
yeah, yeah. You want to smell it just to see if it still smells new.
When I first moved to my to Newton Abbot, where I live in
Yeah,
South Devon, one of the things I did was I had to change my car, and I bought a Morris Minor,
yeah,
and it's got a real Morris Minor feel about it. It's like sort of slightly fake leatherette with lovely shiny bits
yeah,
of
yeah,
and sort of like chrome trim around it. It's just lovely, and the thing about mine was is I think it was hammered
yeah,
as a camera for wedding photographers, which is a very
yeah,
popular thing for those cameras to become.
yeah,
And when you wind the winder, it's
yeah,
like Swiss watch precision. It's delightful to use. I mean, I thoroughly look forward to using
yeah,
it. And I've been thinking about I'm off to India
yeah.
in about 18 days time.
I would love to go to India. Like it's like one of those places to go on like a photography trip and do stuff.
Yeah,
Be stunning.
it's going to be a real blinder of a trip because I'm going down to an area I've never been to before, which is southern India.
Yeah,
I've been to central India, northern India, and northeastern India, but I've never been to the south, so
yeah,
I'm really keen on that. And people often there's a question I get asked, which is, "Where is your favourite place in the world?"
yeah,
And I have to say India. And my cousin actually summed it up beautifully because it is polarized in that
yeah,
sense. he said, when everything's going great, if you're in India, there is no better place to be in the world than India.
Yeah.
And if everything's going wrong, there is no worse place to be
Well,
than
there's just
India.
so many people there, isn't there? Like,
No.
oh my days! Genuinely, that's on the bucket list. New York is also on the bucket
Yeah.
list for architecture and just being around that kind of community of just like
street
intense
photography,
creators. Yeah,
architectural photography, abstract architectural photography. It's a wonderful place to be.
yeah, fair enough. I just got completely sidetracked. It was just like a good conversation that little bit. No, it was good. So what? So you did say there that you shoot with a Canon R3.
Mm-hmm.
What made you choose that particular camera? Was it the guys at Canon being like, you need to switch to an 8 OSR? I probably will take that part out.
Okay, this is kind of part of the story, but I don't upgrade cameras unless I feel that I'm seriously missing out, or that there is a huge part that I need to move myself into. So historically, if you go back to when I first began, okay, I had that camera on the back, the Canon T90 that you got on the wall. That was the first camera I had, about 2000. Bought a film scanner, struggled for a long time with it. 2005, Christmas of, after realising I was spending, I don't know, £800 a year on film and processing and everything, I bought myself a 5D Mark 1, and that camera just changed everything. And then I had that for, about 6 years, but I had it from 2006 to 2008 as my main camera. But the problem was it was the early days and people wanted megapixels. So 12 wasn't enough. And there was this flagship 1DS Mark III, 21 megapixels. You could drop it in the sea and pull it out quickly.
Pull it out quickly,
But it would probably be okay.
Yeah.
And I bought this camera, and it changed everything again.
Yeah.
And then I didn't buy any other cameras despite incremental little upgrades up until 2013 when I bought the 6D Mark 1 because it had Wi-Fi and it had GPS.
Okay.
And that really changed everything again, because for me the biggest problem was working for agencies, stuff like captioning and keywording. I would never remember where I was standing if I was in some street in Spain. And to suddenly be able to go, I was there, excellent, and then simply zoom in and look around, and I would be able to add data.
Okay.
So that became everything. Wi-Fi, being able to remote control the camera from 30 feet away, absolute genius. Then I only bought the 5D Mark IV in 2017 because the 6D was not as weather sealed, and I was going out to places like Norway, Iceland, Finland, and the biggest problem was to do with resilience in very cold temperatures. And so around about that time, I tandemed up. I bought a 1DX, but it just sat in the hotel room doing nothing, lounging around, smoking cigars. I was out taking photographs with the 6D mainly. But then when the winter months came, I just used the 1DX, so I just sold it. It was just it wasn't sensible. The problem with the 6D was it used to just go wrong and freeze, and the shutter would freeze, or the mirror would freeze.
Yeah, but this is like after a long time of using it, I'm guessing.
No, well, not really. It's just, a lot of the adventures that we did in Norway and Finland in all those years was the van was probably -10 inside while he was driving around. But the camera would just like cock up and the batteries would go wrong and things. Anyway, after having a 1DX for a couple of years, I missed it, and I missed the whole handling of it. The fact that it's got that 90-degree, just turn it and everything's the same, and I loved it. It was a brilliant machine. But the thing that made me do that instead of what everybody else does, which is go and buy an R5, was because everybody else buys an R5.
You didn't want to buy it because everyone was doing it.
Because I don't want to do it. Because I've spent loads of my life looking around at what everybody else is doing and then not doing that. Yeah. And to me,
on that note, I think that's actually done you a service, because when I met you at the training, like what I first noticed is how your images are just completely different from what I've seen from everyone else. They're in the same sort of like, you're doing architect, you're doing landscape and stuff like that, but by not following a trend, you've you've really focused on the art form in and of itself, and I think that's important. To be fair,
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I'm not I'm not like sitting in a dark room with the curtains drawn, like trying to think of ways to shock the world with my images.
no,
I'm not that sort of person.
no, no,
I'm just a guy who's used cameras as a vehicle to adventure and as a key to be able to unlock a door to travel and do
yeah,
things. And I've never like been in a position where you look at my work and think, you know, like I've never seen anything like that. You've seen everything I've done before,
yeah,
but what you will be able to find inside, hopefully be able to find, I'd say, in my work is that it's recognizable as me,
yeah,
and it's my style.
yeah,
And I've spent ages pursuing and making mistakes and pursuing further without distraction. And this
yeah,
is the biggest problem in today's modern world, which I'll
yeah.
definitely come on to
I
in a
think
bit.
so. Yeah, I think on that note, there's actually something interesting to talk about because, like, and this isn't to badmouth Instagram photography at all, but like, you know, I've seen videos where like there's a shot and you see it, and then there's another shot that somebody's emulated and just like done a little bit differently, and it just ends up being all these same sort of compositions. And you know, like one of the photos I submitted, and I think that was probably a little bit along that kind of bit too Instagrammy, where it's like a very similar kind of composition to what I'm used to seeing and stuff like that. And maybe that's it's something I think people get too far into, where they focus on trying to emulate themselves and not be themselves in that photo.
Well, let's look at it. I mean, the biggest problem that we have in our modern world today is that we can find the answer from these things, from laptops or phones, and we can instantly have an answer. But what tends to happen is that if you put somebody on their own and allow them to develop with little input, they will develop in a specific way.
Yeah.
They may not be happy or as happy as they would be by making derivative work, but at the same time, because there's instant gratification, should we say, out of that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you allow someone to go on a much longer journey, on a long haul journey, so in other words, they go out and fail and go out and fail, but then come back with some knowledge and go, right, okay, I need to do this. In other words, the heart is telling them what they need to do,
Yeah.
and then go out again and it's still not right, they still feel like it's still not there, then let's just say, metaphorically speaking, the following time they go out,
Yeah.
it'll all come together and they'll be blessed by something that will happen that will be really incredible.
Yeah.
And then they'll walk away with a prize that was hard to achieve,
Yeah.
should we say.
And I think that's with it with a lot of creatives and photographers is like, especially with your work, is, you know, this is lessons that you've learned again and again over years to the point where you've perfected it, and maybe not be as conscious as that, because it's not like, oh, I'm studying this down to the ground, because you pretty much do everything. Like you said, you do a little bit of guitaring, a little bit of this, but these are lessons that you built over failures, over successes, and all of that over years. And, you know, and it's admirable in that retrospect, I think.
I am a creative person, and I don't care how I'm creative. It's as though when I'm at home, not yesterday, but the day before, I spent probably 9 hours playing guitar when I should have been doing other things. But I spent 9 hours because what happened was, the night before, I got a spark of enthusiasm that came to me for a certain set of chords.
Yeah.
The following day, I made the fatal mistake of walking into the front room and picking up my Gretsch electric guitar, playing it through my lovely Fender amp, and before I knew it, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and outpoured a whole set of chords and combinations that got me thinking all day. And I was downstairs later on, making a sandwich, and all I'm doing is my mind is just drifting in and out of these chord sequences. Now, okay, this is a camera podcast, but what I'm saying is that when you have these moments of very fluid creativity, what happens is that everything around you becomes unimportant, and you will flow through everything. So if I go shopping, or if I'm, you know, just doing day-to-day stuff, like I've been gardening a lot this week as well.
Yeah.
My garden's a nightmare. But I'm there floating through the creative process, as if the more I do this, the higher that I'll soar at higher altitudes. And day-to-day stuff becomes less direct. In other words, I don't collide with things like, oh, I've got to go shopping. Oh, I've got to, and all the sort of like, I've got to keep going over hurdles. I'm flying around up here.
Yeah.
It's as though I can just observe it while I know I have to do it, and it's not like I don't do any washing up, or I don't go to the supermarket.
Sounds like you're saying that your missus is watching this now, being like,
right.
you know what, that dude.
That explains a lot.
That explains a lot.
But what we're saying is that the more that you can stay at this higher altitude in the creative realm, and I have to say this, uninterrupted, and I don't mean uninterrupted by all of a sudden you have to go and do a load of stuff, but just uninterrupted in a relative sense.
Yeah.
Then what happens is your ideas become so much better thought out.
Yeah.
Your creative process becomes so much more in tune with your emotions.
That's really interesting.
And you don't end up in this situation where you just feel as though that, right, I've got all this stuff done, I've got to go out with my camera and I have to go out and be creative somehow.
Yeah.
That's forcing it. What you want to do is you want to change your life and your thought patterns and many other things so that your brain is just literally floating around in this creative altitude.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, and if you can stay there, and it's not easy to stay there, believe me, because things do collide with you that you have no choice in the matter of trying to work around or work through. The fact is that your ideas will be so much faster and cleaner. And then when you see something, a visual thing or an audio thing in that case this week, what will happen is that you'll be able to react so much quicker, and you'll have so much of a stronger emotional concept with what it is that you're doing that then comes out in the way that people look at your stuff. It doesn't mean that I'm on the camera all the time. Doesn't mean I'm out shooting all the time, because I'm not like sitting there like a mad pianist doing masses of scales, feeling if I don't do these scales I'm going to lose it. It's not that. What it is that you're creating this sanctuary in your head where everything's safe and everything's cool, and you can just think about things and you're not interrupted, and you can get these ideas and port them through and write them down. Write down ideas. I'm always making audio notes and sticking notes on my iPhone and things. Just things so I don't lose stuff, because these ideas come a lot. It's like, Radiohead. I'm just this radar spinning, and I pick up all these ideas. And you've got to write them down, because if you don't, they will go, and they'll pass, and your ideas will change as something else comes into your life. And you know what I mean? There's a lot of what would be the word? Processing or that's going on with all this. That's got nothing to do with cameras at all. It's about the creative process.
So it's more about your personal creative process than it is about and I agree, because you did say this isn't a camera podcast. I very much view it as kind of like a study on creativity in general, because everyone has their journey when it comes to creativity. Yes, it does have a focus on the camera aspect of it, but I think, and what I'm finding completely fascinating by what you're talking about, is literally the creative process to you is different from somebody else, and what you've done is focus more on you being a creative as a whole and how to make that efficient for your life and how to get better, essentially.
I mean, this is something that people don't explain to you at the very beginning. You come up with a load of objectives, and I was the same when I first began. I mean, look at photography magazines in the mid-2000s. They were all rock in the foreground. I always laugh about that because I'm into rock as well. But rock in the foreground. So it would just be, as soon as you realise that you have a wide angle lens and you can stick it at 16mm and whack it at f/22 and just put it on a low height tripod and just move it around. You can not only move it around on the shore, but you can move it around the world. You can just do the same thing all the time if you want to do that. And I liken this to, it's a bit like rock and roll. Rock and roll is like 3 chords done in the same format and the same style. And you could say, as a creative example, it's not particularly complicated. But when you actually look at it for what it is, everyone likes rock and roll. It's a formula that works. So people stick to formulas. But what happens is, and I noticed this by the time I got to like 2006, after a year with a 5D Mark I, and sticking rocks in the foreground. And I just felt how naive
Yeah.
all this is. Is that it? I'm just going to do that.
Exactly. Well, so I went to college and I was doing my A level for photography. I only got through the AS level, and the reason for that is they were making me study other people's work, and that's what it is when it comes to A level. That's what you do. You study other people's work in order to get better yourself. But why I didn't like it is because yes, we can study other people's work all you like, but when it becomes true for you, are you then focusing too much on other people's work rather than that part of you which is trying to be creative, which is what you're talking about with rock and stuff like that there, I believe, is like, you know, the creative process, and to be good at the creative process and to be able to work on your feet and create things that are unique and different to you. It's better to work with what you've got here than what you've got through, you know, what you're seeing via like Instagram. I mean, there's a reason why, you know, with certain social posts they do amazing and stuff like that, is because maybe you're the first person to actually come up with this idea, but then you're going to end up having thousands of people copy you and stuff like that. So for me, and I think if you do for you to a certain extent, it's about being honest to yourself to be able to create.
Well, I think it's about being honest to your position in the sort of journey, the climbing journey of any artistic pursuit.
Yeah.
And when you first begin and you're an amateur, no one turns around to you and says, okay, to use a music analogy, here's 3 chords.
Yeah.
Now go home and I'll see you next week for your second lesson.
Yeah.
Write me a song.
Yeah.
You'd just be absolutely freaked out by the idea of actually writing a song.
Yeah.
What they want to do is go, look, put your hands here, here, and here, smoke on the water.
Yeah.
Go home, rock out, come back next week, and they're like, I can do it. You know what I mean? So it's an achievement. So if you take it of it in a musical sense, in a photography sense, then there's nothing wrong with getting your camera and doing a rock in the foreground shot, because you're experiencing not only the artistic, but you're also allowing yourself the chance to take away the stress of coming up with something original and concentrating on using the camera technically, which is another really important part.
Yeah, that is important. By saying I didn't like the education, I did like it. Don't get me wrong, but I liked knowing how to shoot and then applying that, and
So then the second thing is that that's like being an amateur. So then there's nothing wrong with like looking through magazines and going, wow, look, that was shot near me. I want to go and do that. Or I like that one. Or I want to go and travel there. I'll go on my first trip and we'll go to Scotland and I'll go to the Isle of Skye and go and bag all the honeypot cliches. Great, nothing wrong with that. So the second thing is that after you've done this for a while, let's say you're an intermediate, you'll now start to get to the point where you're still bagging rocks in the foreground and trees that are notable that you've seen on social media or various other places or magazines. And then what you're doing then is you're getting bored of that. And then the other part of you is going, but I'm worth more than this. I can do more than this. So you start looking and you start searching for stuff. And that's when it starts to get fun, because there's part of you that feels very edgy about doing this. And there's another part of you that loves to return to the safety of the rock in the foreground. Or the Elgol rock like Joe Cornish or something. You know, you're going to do that sort of thing. But what then happens is that as you've become more and more intermediate and you feel more confident in that way, the next thing is that you're then becoming a more advanced amateur where you don't want input. So your iPhone full of pictures that inspire you, or your highlight show reel of pictures that you're using before you go to the Isle of Skye to enjoy your photography trip, and to inspire you onwards, is now no longer necessary. You know where those places are. So rather than going there and suddenly scrolling through your list of pictures from a beach and going, oh, I'm never going to get that. Oh, it's cloudy. It's dull. Well, there's no light. Oh, like this. And, you know, and they're therefore feeling down about it. You go there going, right, black and white, I'm going to do something. I'm going to find something that's really strong. You throw your arms wide. You're all excited and you get on with it. Not you're sitting there feeling down, comparing yourself against pictures, sitting in the car going, I can't even be bothered to get out, I feel so depressed.
I mean, that's a big part of it, is that, you know, there's always going to be someone better, and it doesn't matter about that, but like, you know, comparing yourself to somebody else is not necessarily ever going to do your creativity good, yourself good, and where you want to be with this field in the future.
So
Going
then
out,
so then you got the
seeking discomfort. Yeah.
sorry. So then we got the advanced amateur, or then you've got the professional, should we say, where you're going and you're so self-motivated that you have absolutely no requirement for input. You'll do your research like anybody. You wouldn't go off to somewhere and not know where you were going.
Yeah.
But rather than have a phone or a computer full of pictures that you want to go and bag, you're not going to do that. You don't feel like doing that, because you know if you do that, then what's going to happen is you're just going to come back with a load of derivative work that other people have seen. And okay, I still create derivative work. You know, I'm not going to go somewhere and walk away from something that has a value. And that's something we else haven't even discussed about, which is like the purpose behind it, the genres, or the are you doing this to sell work? Are you doing this to be creative? Is it a personal statement? Are you doing this as something that's literally used for training or whatever else? There's many purposes as to why you go and do it. So the biggest thing is that don't fear being an amateur. Don't fear being an advanced amateur, but make the progression and push yourself always forwards, thinking about where am I going to go? How am I going to do this? What am I going to do? And some people find the creative process very complicated. They find it very difficult. Other people have a better flow of it. But if you think about computers allow us to be able to then enhance what it is that we photograph. And you can get a different sort of boost in your ability from knowing that you're very good with computers. You've got a lot to learn with the art. But you could be the other way around. You're very good with art, but you're just not very good with computers. Or you could be really good at selling yourself and being online and not very good at either of the other two. So there's room for everybody in this when it comes to the actual arena of photography or art or whatever.
100%. Because there is definitely the market of like people who aren't necessarily great at photography, and they can just sell themselves. And there are people that are great at photography, but they can't do it because like there are a bunch of people when I had a bunch of friends I know that have taken photos, and it was like, you've got just talent, you've got a creative eye there, why don't you try something? And it's just something that they don't necessarily want to do because it's like, but
there's also the fact that this pursuit is quite solitary. It's not like you're in a band where you got like 5 other people and you're working as a team for an objective. Most of it's relatively solitary. And because it's solitary, and because of the very nature of the fact that we've emotionally invested in a specific thing, we want very badly to communicate that and to feel accepted for our concepts. And the thing is that when you don't get that back, if you don't get that back, especially at the beginning, you feel as though, well, I don't even know what I'm doing. Where am I headed? And the thing is that I'm at the stage, I'm right at the other end of it now, in the sense that I don't even care if I have any input, or if I do have input, I only get input from a few people who I know who know me, and that who trust me, or I trust their judgment in what I'm doing. So this comes to my decision that I made probably about 4 years ago, and I just removed myself from all social media related stuff. And it wasn't because I had a massive hang up or anything. It was more to do with the fact that I found that by allowing myself the space and the time to evolve, in other words, naturally, without this whole, I've been to Dartmoor twice now and I've got nothing, and well, what am I going to do? I've got to put a post out on my followers. Oh my God. Like, let's not have any of that, right? Let's just go there and fail 5 times, and then let's get the 5th time and then feel as though there's the triumph, as I explained in my analogy earlier. It's about realizing and approaching this with a massive maturity, not to have this, I've got to pin a picture on the corkboard that everyone sees, otherwise they'll think I don't exist. And the thing is that comes from our modern anxieties that we have, but it also comes from the fact being that we're relatively solo on this pursuit, and there's no feeling of like communication unless we do that in the fastest, quickest way to get that dopamine back. It's not constructive. Not long term. Not for the long haul.
100%. This is fascinating. Like, genuinely, it's really interesting because, you know, in terms of like where I'm at in my creative field, you know, I'm still quite young on the grand scheme of things, but you know, it's interesting talking to someone that has been through all of this, and you know, and is continuing to do so. And what I like about doing the podcast, and what I find with everybody that I end up talking to, is that I always end up learning something new and something I can be fascinated by. Maybe apply it to, no, not necessarily to copy or anything, but you know, to engage a new way of thinking when it comes to the creative process. And you've definitely done that to me today.
Well, like
It's all fascinating. Like, and it's really interesting hearing your perspective of it. Yeah,
I'm 53.
yeah,
I've been doing this since I was in my early 30s.
yeah,
But before that, I've been doing this playing guitar since I was 17.
yeah.
So if we say, like, if we look at it all as how long have I been trying to be creative or to make things in that sense, it's been a long time.
Well, it's a part. It's a part of you from like when you're born, when you start playing with bricks, to when you start drawing. You know, when you know the creative process. I mean, you can ask somebody. For example, you can have somebody that's been doing it 8, 10 years. Yeah. And then you got somebody that's been doing it for 3 years, and their photos are arguably better than the person that's been doing it for a long time, right? But it's not about how long they've been doing it. It's been how long they've been embracing their creativity. You know, if they have been embracing their creativity through other means, like, you know, they're drawing or they're crocheting, or you know, they building other ways of building up their brain and their idea towards creativity, you're going to end up finding people that are actually more experienced than the person that's been doing it 10 years. They've been doing it, hey, 30, 40 years, you know, or however long they've been alive for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think the what tends to happen as you move through this process, as you go further and further into it, is that you tend to train yourself to worry less.
yeah,
And that the why am I doing this? What am I doing it for? Becomes less, you know, less problematic.
yeah,
And don't get me wrong, I still have my fears. You know,
yeah,
it's not as though I'm just wandering around and, you know, like I said, in a roll neck, like, you know, in a white Mac-filled office, just throwing
yeah,
shapes or something.
yeah,
You know, it's not that. It's more that I have the space in my life now to really fully dedicate myself to doing things, and also the maturity to be able to look at what it is I'm producing and not just immediately feel the fear.
yeah,
If you get the fear when you're supposed to be trying to extend your ideas to a much greater height, the problem is the fear will make you get out of the lift at floor 2,
yeah,
instead of taking you to the top of the tower block in that sense and trying to elevate your creative process that way. You'll get out earlier because you'll be like, oh, I can't risk it. I can't risk traveling further up if I'm not going to get anything for it, you know. And it's a bit like, okay, another analogy, like climbing a mountain. You know, you're climbing up this mountain, and you know, you're okay. You could choose a small mountain to start with, and you can try a larger one, and then the more you get into this, the longer the higher it goes, the longer it seems to take, and then halfway up, you're sort of looking around, going, "Wow, I'm really this high up," and then you turn around and look up, and you go, "I've got so much further to go," and it never changes.
No.
It's still always the same process of you're climbing and building and learning, and
sometimes it's just bad good to be in that moment at that time. You've got a distance to go. That's always going to be the case. That's a bad mindset to go. And if you focus on the destination, you're not going to focus on what's happening. I know it sounds cheesy, but you're not going to focus on the journey getting there.
Yeah.
And sometimes the journey getting there can be the best part of it. It's the symphony before the symphony before the encore, or the climax or whatever. It's the bit in between that lulls you into this place. And it's really fascinating. You have talked quite a bit about kind of, you start doing a particular kind of photography, then you do another, you get bored of that, you do another, you do this. What interested you about infrared photography in particular?
Oh, it was just the change of everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I was writing regularly for an online magazine, ePhotozine.
Yeah.
And they asked me to donate my camera, or a camera, second body. and get it converted to infrared.
Yeah.
So I thought, I've never really tried this. It was like 2009 or something.
Yeah.
And I got my 5D Mark 1 converted
Yeah.
to IR. I got a 720 conversion, as it's called.
Yeah.
I never took a colour photo again for about another 5 months. I was utterly fascinated at how this thing translated the world around me.
Yeah.
And then what happened is that I started to get image sales out of it, and I'd never really done that before.
Okay.
And then also, because as I've said about many genres and things, one of my genres is writing for magazines and photography magazines, things like that. I realised that I suddenly had this very unusual take on the world.
Yeah.
But rather than just, you know, go and photograph some lone tree on Dartmoor, I was like, hang on a minute, what about all these other zones that I do, like architecture? What does architecture look like in infrared?
Yeah.
And suddenly it was like, wow, I can shoot things that are recognisable, that people have seen before, like the Eiffel Tower, and now do it in infrared, and now go down this crazy rabbit hole of channel swapping and turning these things into colour images and all these other weird things. So I can create something that is familiar, but is unique.
Yeah.
And I suddenly kept thinking, well, this is where I need to be headed, because if I want to retain identity without, like I said before, you know, trying to think of ways to shock the world with pictures, which is really, really complex, you know, I could do it this other way, which is to do familiar things, and to make them accessible. And suddenly this camera would just translate whatever I was looking at into this bizarre piece of art. Sometimes it would work.
Yeah. Sometimes it wouldn't.
It
but
wouldn't.
and you know, that goes back to having some failures. You know, it's always good to have these things that don't work and to focus on kind of like not necessarily focus on failures, learn by them and adapt, because you're going to have plenty of failures when it comes to photographs, but like you're going to end up having that shot that's just like, yes, that's perfect.
But what it also did was it made me realise that I was constantly moving ahead of myself. If you went to my website, and this is one of the things I like about going to my website, is that if you go to my latest work, you haven't got a clue what's coming. You have not got.
I really don't, and I love it. Like just looking through your like latest work, I'm just like, this is great. And, like every photo, like I'm like, that's amazing. This guy's creative eye is just like incredible. But like, I really don't know what's going to happen next. Like, you did a black light lizard, scorpion. Like you did a black light scorpion. I was just like, you know, that's a really cool photo.
Well, if people don't know what you're talking about, so what it was I ran a workshop last year in Namibia, and one of the guys who came with me had a black light, which is basically a UV torch, and he said, oh, it's just interesting to find things in the desert at night, and he said also because of going in the tent, you don't want to find you got something in the tent with you. And I suddenly went, wow, we can use this. So we were wandering around the desert at night, like trying to find stuff, and we found these little tiny scorpions. And I started I took one photo of it right at the very end of the trip, and I was like, got home straight away on Amazon, bought myself a black light. And then this time when I went out again, I went wandering around in the same desert areas looking for stuff. Wasn't actually that successful, and then found a lovely scorpion right at the very end again. And photographed it with a macro lens. It stayed still for about 5 seconds while I shot my RF 100mm. And actually, the funny thing was as well is I worked out that it's better when you side light it. So I was there with a torchlight going over the top of it like this, trying to work out the lighting angles while looking at the back screen. And so in other words, it's like a sunrise, a UV sunrise. but going back to my point I said earlier is that I like, you know, okay, we were sort of talking about social media earlier again as well. What I would rather anybody who sees this to do is, firstly, you won't find me on any social media, but what I would like people to do is just go to my website for 5 minutes every month.
Yeah.
Just go and have a look at what I've been doing for the last month for 5 minutes. That's a bit like sitting there with a coffee table book and opening it up and just going through the first 15 pages,
hitting the button on random and just seeing what comes up. Yeah.
And if you feel compelled, go and have a look at some of the other zones I've worked on, or styles or things, and have a look at that.
And just to back that up, I haven't had as much fun looking at you know, I've been in contact with a lot of photographers, but looking through his website and actually seeing the range of photography on there is amazing,
Oh,
and
thank
it's
you.
all like perfectly composed. It's like, it's like what you would imagine. Do you like Star Wars?
I do.
You do. It's like Jedi Master kind of like level of like photography, and it's fascinating. Like
That's
every
very
time,
kind.
it's just different.
Well, I think that the thing is that I'm very technical in the
Yeah,
sense that I beat myself up about composition. To me, it's composition, composition, composition. It's the primary
yeah,
thing, and the important side of it is that it's the energy that sits inside the picture. If you've got that slightly wrong, or it's slightly out, or you're not perfectly
yeah,
in the middle, and you're trying to do a symmetrical shot, or
yeah.
the things that are going together in the picture have not been considered.
Mm.
Right, if I play a piece of music to my mum and the vocals are too loud or the hi-hat's too loud, she'll listen to it and go, it's okay. Let's say it's a very good piece of music.
Yeah,
If I mix it properly and then play it to
yeah,
her, oh, this is marvelous. Shall
yeah,
we say?
yeah,
So the fact is that whether you understand anything about music or whether you understand anything about photography or not,
yeah,
what you can feel
yeah,
is a well composed concept.
yeah,
And if you can do that, if you can make sure that everything that you create has that energy sitting in the middle.
yeah,
In other words, you're looking through the viewfinder going, this is wrong. I need to go forward. I need to go down. I need to zoom in. I need to tighten. I need to look at my edges. I need to look at the all these things. Is the light right? No. Well, then I've got to do that and come back when it is, or similar. And what will happen is that when you present that to somebody, whether they understand art, photography, music, anything or
yeah,
not, they will feel this draw. They'll engage with it.
yeah,
If you cock any of that up in any way, then what will happen is someone will start to ask themselves questions.
yeah,
And the other thing that's really important, especially with that idea, is that the mind spends 2 seconds
yeah,
looking at the picture or listening or whatever, or should we say looking at the photograph in
yeah,
this case, and then the next thing it does is it goes on a rampage of have I been tricked? It looks for problems. It goes
yeah,
so like, wow, what's this? Hang on a minute. And then you start to look around.
yeah,
And then if you can't find anything wrong with it, or there's nothing wrong at all, then what happens is that you end up with this satisfaction of that what you've actually seen is fine.
yeah,
And then you start to enjoy without restriction
yeah,
as you surrender into the picture. And
yeah,
you start to look around, well, I didn't notice that bit, or didn't notice that or that. And what I've done is I've beaten myself up to such a degree when I'm composing the picture for the right timing or the right composition, or making sure everything is as perfect as I can get it,
yeah,
so that you effortlessly fall in.
yeah.
That's the idea. And if
Yeah.
you can do that, then it all falls into place underneath.
Perfect. It's been fascinating. I'm gonna absolutely love editing this together. It's probably gonna be approaching an hour at this point, but that's
God.
good. No, that's good. I mean, it keeps me entertained. Any advice that you would give somebody looking to get into doing photography? I feel
Yeah,
like we've covered a lot in this already, but
Well, we've looked at the more esoteric side, haven't we? I suppose
Yeah,
more
yeah,
than
yeah.
anything. Right. Okay. Camera equipment. You don't need a lot to do a lot.
Yeah.
And the fact is that I started out with all sorts of weird equipment, and the reason is because I couldn't afford any better equipment
Yeah.
at the time. I had a 5D Mark One and then the 1DS3, but I used an adapted set of lenses. I was using a Contax 35 to 70 as my main lens. That was
Yeah.
and you'd be thinking, that's not wide enough. That's not long enough. Okay, I had a 7200, and then I had a 1740, and then I replaced it with a Nikon 1424.
Yeah.
So it was mainly a Nikon 1424, 3570, 7200, and that combination of all of those was just magic.
Yeah.
Now, you could buy any of those on today's market for not that much.
No.
And the reason for the adapted lenses was at the time the others were too expensive. The L series lenses were too expensive. But the other thing was that I just liked the look of them. They were different. So what we're saying is that you can get away with using any piece of kit. It doesn't really matter. And in today's modern world as well, the quality of those bodies, the noise control that you get from those sensors, and any modern cameras that we have now are fantastic. So here I am with an R3 right at the very end of it, and I bought that for video.
Yeah.
But at the other end of the, let's say for example, the IR camera,
Yeah.
I have Canon EOS RP.
Yeah.
And that RP is delightful to use. It's just fast and quick and very easy.
Yeah.
But with the R3, with its endless menus and lots of complicated stuff, complicated concepts, so to speak. Yeah. For me, the whole point in that was video, and I'm learning video now as I'm going and moving through this. But the camera itself, when set correctly, and I set all my custom functions and things like that, means I can pick up the camera and I could be shooting static, could be shooting static indoors, and I could be shooting action. Yeah. Just flip between 3 custom settings and I can do any of those things. So in other words, setting your camera up so as soon as you spot something, as soon as your spontaneity locks onto things, you can then grab the camera, do a very small thing, and bang, you're there. Yeah, that's been a huge, very important time saver for me. Rather than, oh, hang on, I'm on 2-second timer, and I've got all this other, I'm on the 3,500K and all these other things. You can just immediately override all that. So learn to be spontaneous as much as you can. Understand the lenses that you're using. In other words, test your lenses. People don't even do this. So I buy a lens and I'll stick it on the tripod and I'll go all through the apertures. When I've done that, I will go all through the same apertures at varying focal lengths, assuming it's a zoom. Yeah. And I will learn the strengths and weaknesses of that lens. Okay. And then what I'll do is I'll do exactly the same for every piece of kit. So I'll work out all this stuff in advance so that whenever I'm on site, I know exactly what I need. And train your mind to, as you're walking up to a picture, you go, right, I'm going to take my bag off. I need my, let's say, 24-105. I'm going to use a wider aperture. I want an out of focus depth of field. That will probably mean I'll need ISO 400. And it will then mean that my shutter speed will be probably, if I look at the light now, a 400th of a second or something. And let's just imagine those results. So then you're unzipping your bag. From the minute that zip goes and the bag is flipped up, you're then on a mission to assemble to that point. Yeah. And then as you're going up, okay, it's a 200th of a second. Okay, it's ISO 200. Okay, whatever. You're going to tweak on the way. But you're not just standing there with the bag zipped open, looking at a load of gear going, what am I going to use? By the time you've done that, bang, it's gone. You know what I mean? So you have to train yourself to always think forwards ahead of yourself. Yeah. It's a bit like, again, we say playing the guitar. If you sit there just dreaming away while you're playing, you'll make mistakes. If you're thinking, here comes a C change, here comes a G change, here comes this, I'm going to do this, and you're always ahead of yourself. You're listening to what's happening, but you're thinking ahead of yourself all the time. You'll make less mistakes. And then from that, what will happen is you will get greater successes and you'll become even more excited about what you're doing. Yeah. That's a good tip.
That's a good tip. Fascinating, man. Genuinely, it's been lovely having you on today. Look forward to perhaps doing some stuff with you in the future.
Yeah, let's do it.
Really awesome. Thank you, man, for coming down.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure talking to you. I'm gonna have to be processing a lot, but like it's good. It's good. Like
excellent.
I knew you would be good to have on.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
No worries.
Yeah.
Cool.
The main thing is that I just spend a lot. I spent a lot of time like going through this stuff. You know what I mean? And the thing is as well is that when I have these opportunities.